Hi and welcome. My name is Lawrence Baker and this video is going to be about going from Lightroom to the PrintSpace Print Bureau in London. So it's for UK people only. Now I use the PrintSpace. They're based in Shoreditch in London, which is a very creative area of London. So they're working with a lot of creatives and I would say they're the best print bureau I've ever been with. So I'm being very specific here, but some of the things will still apply, but basically it's all going to be about the PrintSpace. But you will still get something from this, even if you're going to a different print bureau. Here's my image, and let's press the space bar to have a look at it. Now, let's say I've got all the color right and I've sharpened it all up, etc., etc. What do I need to be aware of when I'm going to a print bureau? Now, you're going to be working in a color managed workflow. So you need to have a profiled monitor. So you need either to do that with your eye and the operating system tools, which means manually, or you can use a colorimeter or a spectrophotometer. Now, the best route is the spectrophotometer, colorimeter, monitor profiler route. Call it what you like. So let's go to Chrome and I'll show you one. So this is from Datacolor. It's the Spider X Pro or the Spider X Elite. I don't mind the Pro. That's the one I'm going to buy soon. So it works absolutely fine. It's got a few extra bells and whistles, this one, which I don't really care about, to be honest with you. So the Pro will be fine for me. Roughly £110, £120, same in euros and roughly that in dollars. So it's not over the top. Now, if you can't afford one, you're going to have to do your monitor profiling manually. Just search on Google. You can do it yourself, but for more accuracy, I recommend going down this route. And I recommend Spider because I've used other companies. I'm not going to run them down, but their profilers weren't very good. Datacolor, I've been very impressed with. So that's the first thing you should do. Make sure your monitor is profiled. There's certain caveats or things you need to understand as well. With Lightroom, you can't resize as such. You can do a crop and you think you're changing the size. Yes, you are, but you're not going to get it to your destination size very, very rarely. In fact, I can almost say it's never going to happen. Now, normally in Photoshop, you'd resize then sharpen. But in Lightroom, we have to rely on sharpen on export. And I'll show you that when we get to it. So there's lots of things you need to be aware of. Obviously, the sizes the print bureau want as well can be a little bit confusing, but I'll explain to you what happens when we get there. But I'm going to show you the PrintSpace website. Now, straight away, I know they're a good site or print bureau because they have their print profiles ready for download. I've downloaded them already. I'll show you what they look like. They will have .ICC for International Color Consortium. You have to get them into your operating system. That will be different for every operating system. I'm on a Mac. You could be on a Windows system, so I'm not going to show you how to do it. It's even got a few PDFs here about using profiles in Lightroom, etc. So you need to get them into your operating system, then Photoshop or Lightroom can read them. So that's something that's very specific to the operating system. I'm not going to cover it. I've done this already. So back to Lightroom. Here's my image. Now, if you're going to do soft proofing, and soft proofing means you're basically going to get the print profile and compare it to what you've got already and see what's out of gamut, which is not going to be reproduced exactly by the printer. Because a printer's gamut of colors, that's what they call it, GAMUT, is much smaller than ProPhoto RGB, because when you're working in the develop module in Lightroom, you're in ProPhoto RGB, which is a huge color space. So there's going to be some colors that will not make it through. But if you profiled your monitor, it won't be the end of the world because the printer will do its best to match that color. But you can, if you want to, bring those out of gamut colors back into the gamut of the printer profile. I'm going to show you this all in a minute. So we got our image. Notice the size up there in pixels. It's not my image, it's from a guy called Lawrence Moss. It's a great image. So I'm going to sort of do him justice by printing this properly. So I've got the image here. We need to create a soft proof. Now, I'm not going to go up to the menu because it makes it too complicated. Just a D on my keyboard. You could come up here and type in SOFT and you can see or anything to do with soft proofing. The way I like to do it is this, S on your keyboard. If you press T for the toolbar, you can see you can go like that for soft proofing as well. So S will turn it off, S will turn it back on, or you can tick down there. T to lose the toolbar. Zoom levels at the moment are fit and 8:1, so I'm going to turn the left-hand side panel off, F7. I need to create a proof copy. If I started to play around with the sliders like so, it's going to prompt me to do that. I recommend you do. I'm going to undo it on this occasion and just go create proof copy. That creates a virtual copy, G on my keyboard for the grid, which is down there. It's got that name there, which is the copy name. That's been done by Lightroom. Command and Control J, you can see I've got copy name there, and it's got the upturned paper symbol on the bottom left-hand corner. So it's got my print profile there. It's fine. I'm not touching the original. D on my keyboard to get back to it. Starting from the top, that stuff the monitor can't cope with, and that stuff the destination gamut, which is that one down there, can't cope with. Now, if you go like that, you can turn it off or you can mouse over it. You can see where we got a problem. Now, it's pretty difficult to see here, and you have to keep playing sometimes to see it. It's actually that roundel down there. So when I turn that on by clicking on it or turn it off, you can see that color cannot be reproduced exactly on the PrintSpace C-Type Fuji Gloss. I have two choices. I can leave it alone, or I can try and bring it back into the gamut of the printer. As it's just one color here, I'm not going to bring it back into the gamut of the printer because I'd have to start playing around with these sliders. They will be global adjustments, so I might have to use an adjustment brush. Now, I don't know why it's out of gamut. It could be the color, hue, saturation, the tonality. I don't know. So it could be a lot of playing around. But if you profiled your monitor, the printer will do its best to match that color. So you don't have to sweat too much about this. If it was a lot of colors and you're really concerned, yes, try and get them back into the gamut of the destination profile, which you can see here will be there. If you click on it, you keep it on permanently, turn it off or just mouse over, you can see it. So even for the monitor, I can't cope with it as well. But I don't want to go down that route too much. We're only worrying about the destination profile. Now, perceptual or relative. Relative, it says here, preserves color accuracy, but clips out of gamut detail. Perceptual preserves out of gamut detail, but may change in gamut colors. Perceptual is the way your eye perceives things. It's quite a complex subject, a lot of science behind it. I prefer perceptual. So I'm going to keep it on perceptual. Obviously, simulate paper and ink because we're going out to a printer. So I've made my choice. The next thing I need to worry about is sharpening. Now, I could have done some sharpening already, so double check that I haven't. Double click on sharpening, double click on noise reduction, and make sure everything's basically at its default. Now, I am really zoomed in here, and I don't mind that. F7, because I can always change it. I'm going to put it over the cockpit because sharpening for print has to be done slightly differently. You need to over sharpen slightly because ink spreads on paper. There's a technical name for that. I don't know what that name is. So it sort of takes away from the sharpening. So you need to over sharpen slightly. This is quite arbitrary. It's quite experimental. If you had your own printer, you might have to waste a bit of ink to understand what's going on. But to be totally honest with you, Lightroom does get it quite right because on export, Shift, Command and Control E, what you have to do is make sure you've got output sharpening on. I'm using glossy paper. It needs to be on standard. Standard is the one I prefer. I don't like high, so I'm going to stick with standard. That is what works for me. So I will cover this in more detail in a minute. So sharpening, the first thing I like to do, I'm going to come back out Z or Z on my keyboard to come back out to fit. I'm going to put the masking up first because I like to decide what areas I want sharpened and don't want sharpened first. This is my choice. Alt or Option key kept pressed because sharpening's all about luminosity. As I keep the key, Option or Alt key kept pressed, drag to the right, I'm basically excluding more and more areas. The whiter it is, the more likely it is to be sharpened. The darker it is, the less likely it is to be sharpened. So if I go right up, I'm basically, just sticking to the edges. But around 35 seems to work for me. I don't want to bring up too much noise into the shadows, so I might go up to about 40. It's very arbitrary. This is my choice. Now I zoom back in. Now I'm using 8:1 for this video, but you should always be on a minimum of 1:1. In fact, I often go for 2:1, but for this video, it's 8:1, Z or Z. So you can see what's going on. So obviously I'm sort of making things look a bit funky because I'm over zoomed in, but it's to give you the concept of what's going on with sharpening. I've done my masking at what I call fit on screen. Now I'm at 8:1. Alt or Option key kept pressed. Amount is about contrast. That is a luminance border. Forget about the colours. There's a change in luminosity. That is what sharpening is all about. It finds these edges and then you decide on the radius and the amount of contrast you want. So Alt or Option key kept pressed. If I put the sharpening up to 150, why it goes to 150 I don't know, but if you keep bringing it down, you'll find a compromise because I'm really breaking up the image there. So around, don't forget I need to over sharpen a little bit, around 40, 50 I'm going to go for. So this is, you know, my choice. I might be overdoing it, I don't know, but I think it's going to work around 50. For the radius, as we've got a border here, and if I start moving this up to 3, you'll start seeing the white border, the contrast border, get wider. So all you're saying is at 1 or 0.5 is the lowest you can go. So that's a 0.5 pixel radius. Up there is going to 3. That's far too much, obviously. And you'll really start breaking up the image. I still might go for around 1 or even a little bit more because I'm slightly over sharpening for print. Now detail, if you turn detail down, keep the Alt Option key kept pressed, it almost turns off the sharpening. That's why it's on 25. You need a bit of detail for everything to work, but it's about high frequency detail, the texture of things. That's what high frequency means in photography. It's the finer texture. So bring the detail slider up. If you go to 100, it ruins your image. It can ruin your image a lot. I find 25 to be too much under most circumstances, so I'm going to stick around 15 to 16 there. Turning sharpening on and off now, the detail panel on and off, before, after, don't forget I'm over sharpening. Tiny amount of noise, Alt Option key kept pressed, bring the luminance slider up a bit. This takes away from the sharpening because you're kind of smoothing off things, but if you want to preserve the detail, move the detail slider up. It's on 50 by default. It doesn't work until you put some luminance on anyway. So I'm going to put a tiny amount on, which is 10. And I think that's fine. Don't forget, I'm really over zoomed in. So off and on again, off, on, I think that's working. So if I went to 1:1, you probably wouldn't notice much difference. Softer, bit sharper. I think that's acceptable. I could even push the amount a little bit more and maybe the radius a little bit more and maybe the detail a tiny amount and bring the masking down just to slightly over sharpen it. It's very arbitrary. It's my choice. So the next thing you need to be aware of is your aspect ratio. It happens to be almost square. Most online print bureaus will say to you 300 ppi, and ppi only matters when you're going to print, by the way, as far as Lightroom is concerned. So if I went to Shift Command and Control E for file export, you can see if I turn that off, I'm basically saying, well, I'll let you do the sizing. What size am I going to get? But at a certain size, let's say 5335. Let's go to the calculator here. 5335 divided by 300. That's all you have to do is, well, let's say 18 inches. The other measurement was 5005. 18 inches, 5005. Divided by 300, 18 inches by 17 inches, almost square. Now, if now in Lightroom, let's press Z or Z, Shift Command and Control E to export. If I turn that off, make sure you're on the right file settings here. Color space should be the color space you're going out to. So yeah, make sure that's right. I will cover that in a minute. Basically, I will get that 16 by 18 inches, whatever it was. That's the size you're going to get. So look at the pixel dimensions. Make sure they're showing. So Command and Control J, make sure you've got crop dimensions showing somewhere. And just divide those two figures by 300. So if you go to export now, basically untick that, you'll get what you'll get basically, which is roughly 16 by 18 inches, almost square. Now, how much will that cost you? PrintSpace. Let's have a look. Let's go to Chrome and go to prices. I love their website. It's very clear as well. So 16 by 18 inches will fit in the, I'm pushing a little bit, but fit in the 16 to 20 inch template. So that would be £13.88 I'd have to pay for that to be that, that size, because basically I don't care about the size. And this is an important concept to get as well. What I'm saying is I'm not doing any interpolation. I'm not upsampling the image. I'm not downsampling it. I'm just putting 300 pixels into 1 inch, and that's the size I'm going to get if I don't make it any larger or smaller. So 16 by 18 inches roughly, and I'll be charged £13.88. Now, if you want a particular size, let's say 20 by 24, you're going to have to come back to Lightroom and crop to that aspect ratio. R on my keyboard. We now know roughly what we're going to get, but I'm going to do 20 to 24. So enter custom, 20, just put the whole figure in by 24. You got that there. Return 5335 by 4446. So 5335, calculator again, sorry, calculator. 5335 divided by 300, 17 inches. And the other one was, sorry, 4446. So back to calculator, 4446 divided by 300. So was it 18 inches by 14 inches? That's the native resolution at 300 I'm going to get. That's the size I'm going to get. But if I want that size of 20 by 24 there, on export, I would go like this. Shift, Command and Control E, and put in 20. Let's resume that for the width, and 24 at 300. I'm going to have interpolation take place. Notice these sizes, 5335 by 4446. The file is going to have to get larger by a small amount. So when I export it, use unique names. So remember those two figures, 5335 and 4446. Command O to open it in Preview app. Command I. It's now 6,000 by 5,000 pixels, and it was 5,335 by 4446. So Lightroom has interpolated that image, made it larger. You pulled the pixels apart and infilled them. That's what interpolation is. So it's not its natural size. I've upscaled it, and that means a slight degradation in quality. Now, interpolation is done automatically in Lightroom. It's not done like that in Photoshop. You've got a choice. And normally you resize and then sharpen. And that is another thing I'm going to come to now. So Shift, Command and Control E, file export. Make sure you've got the color space picked for the one you want, you've kind of profiled for. JPEG's fine. You can use TIFF with the PrintSpace, but JPEG's fine. Quality 100. You're very unlikely to break their file size limits in bytes. So resize to fit is 20 by 24. So I would go out now, sharpen for glossy paper, amount standard. I don't use high and I don't use low. It works for me because you can't do resize and sharpen as you can in Photoshop. You're just going to have to rely on this output sharpening. It does work, and I've never used high or low. Standard is fine. So I actually want to go out at 30 by 30. This is going to cause upsampling. So, upscaling of the image basically is going to use, interpolation to basically resize the image. So I want it 30 by 30. I'm going to have to use a 1-to-1 crop. R on my keyboard, and it's one of the normal settings here. So just go down here and pick 1-to-1. I like that. That's fine. Return. Shift, Command and Control E. Check through. Right file settings here. Right color space. I want it 30 by 30. Like so. Always 300 ppi. And obviously you wouldn't tick don't enlarge because it won't enlarge it for you. It won't do any interpolation. So keep that unticked. Sharpen for glossy paper, amount standard, so all the color space is right, everything's right. And I think 30 by 30 will be a good size as well. Export, use unique names, because I've done this many times, obviously. It's going to make it significantly larger, so it took a little bit of time there. Command or Control O to open in my preview app. Notice it's 9,000 by 9,000 pixels. It's upscaled it. Now I'm looking at not its natural size. Command 0 will be actual size. So, it's not perfect. Let's make it full screen. Command minus. But, resolution is also about the distance you view something from. I think that interpolation, the actual resampling is done, is absolutely fine. The sharpening's fine because obviously I resize the image, so that resize on export, that sharpen on export, I should say, is very important. So back to Lightroom one more time. Let's run through that export panel. Shift, Command and Control E. Make sure you pick the right format. You can use TIFF with the PrintSpace, but JPEG's fine. 100 quality. If you did use TIFF, you can play around with the compression and stuff like that. Honestly, you don't need TIFF. JPEG is fine. Always 100, the right color space. Make sure you crop to the aspect ratio. If you pick an aspect ratio here or size here that doesn't match the aspect ratio, only one edge will be respected. So you have to get your crop right first. Don't enlarge unticked. Resolution of 300, it's always 300. Very few print bureaus will quote you anything else at all. If they don't mention resolution, don't use them. This is why I use the PrintSpace. Fantastic website. Everything's very obvious. Sharpen for glossy paper, which it is. It's the PrintSpace C-Type Fuji Gloss. Standard will be fine. Yeah, metadata doesn't matter. It's going to a printer, etc., etc. So you just go export and Bob's your uncle. You've got your image. I hope I've explained everything. Profile your monitor. Soft proof to see what colors will be out of gamut. If you profiled your monitor, don't worry about it too much. If you want to bring them back into the gamut of the profile, printer profile, entirely up to you. I don't often recommend it. And then basically get the aspect ratio right for the size you want. As I said, you'll always have a native size that you will have at 300 ppi that won't require any interpolation. All you have to do is untick that and divide the two amounts by 300. So you know basically what you're going to get. So 4446 calculator, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 divided by 300. Well, let's say 15 inches. So the native size roughly will be 15 inches by 15 inches without any interpolation. So all you'd have to do then, if you wanted that size, you just untick this. You'll get the absolute best quality. You can't get any better than that. But if you do want to resize, it's going to go outside of those parameters of 15 inches by 15 inches. You're going to have to use interpolation. You can't see it taking place. You can in Photoshop. Trust it, it does work. So you've got these choices. So I hope you've understood this because it's quite an involved subject. I use the PrintSpace. I really recommend them. Slightly more expensive than some bureaus, not because they're just based in London, because a lot of their work is, done online. But I honestly will tell you, it's the best bureau I've ever used. So that's it, guys. That's going from Lightroom to the PrintSpace Bureau in the UK. Thank you very much.